Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this journey of the way of the cross. For many of us experiencing the reality of isolation and loneliness, this is a special opportunity to be in solidarity with the suffering experienced by our sisters and brothers throughout the world. We're thankful to Food for the Poor for making available these images and reflections today. Today, we see the face of the suffering Christ in the experience of every person who suffers from poverty or cries out for help. The set of stations presented here centers on the experiences of the suffering poor. We are reminded that Christ lives among us still, sharing the pain of our destitute brothers and sisters. The first station on the way, Jesus is condemned to death. Alone, mocked, beaten, and spat on, Jesus is condemned to death. Forced to carry his cross with no one to aid him, he is left to suffer his inevitable fate. Frequently, our poorest brothers and sisters in Christ are ignored by an oblivious world that often condemns them to death when their cries for help go unnoticed. Lord, let us always hear and respond to the cry of the poor as we serve our brothers and sisters in need. The second station on the way, Jesus carries his cross. The heavy weight of the cross bears down upon Christ in his struggle to walk along the road to Golgotha. Forced to walk miles every day to find wood his impoverished family can cook with, he carries the pain of his daily burden on his back, seeking something most of us don't need in order to survive. Lord, let us always be there to serve our brothers and sisters in need. The third station on the way, Jesus falls the first time. Staggering beneath the tremendous burden of extreme poverty, Christ collapses to the ground from the pain of his cross. He has no home, no food, no proper clothing, no water, and no hope. He is among thousands of voices crying out for a caring hand to help them to his feet. Our poorest brothers and sisters in Christ have nowhere to turn because their neighbors are impoverished as well. They cling to hope and prayer in the struggle to survive each day. Lord, may we never fail to reach out in compassion to feed you and ease your pain as we serve our brothers and sisters in need. The fourth station on the way, Jesus meets his mother. An anguished Mary watches in despairing silence as her precious little boy suffers from hunger and the indignity of poverty. Without resources or income to feed him or to build a safe, comfortable home, this woman and other women like her bear the overwhelming burden of poverty that condemns their children's futures. Lord, let us always shelter you from the storm as we reach out with a loving hand to serve our brothers and sisters in need. The fifth station on the way, Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry his cross. She is too weak from hunger to stand on her own. This poor young girl depends on help from others to carry the burden of poverty. It is in caring for one another that we help lift the cross of suffering from the shoulders of the poor. We are honored and blessed to help Jesus carry his cross as we walk with him to Calvary. Lord, we faithfully share your struggle to carry the cross of hunger, disease, and homelessness as we reach out to serve our brothers and sisters in need. The sixth station on the way, Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. In an uncertain world, where the poor are sickly and are often abandoned and ignored, Jesus is comforted by a nurturing and caring child. Sad and alone, Christ finds temporary solace in a simple act of kindness. With few medical resources available and lacking the reassurance of a simple human touch, Christ suffers in the countless ill people who are alone and abandoned in the developing world. Let us set aside fear and embrace faith in all circumstances as we reach out to serve our brothers and sisters in need. The seventh station on the way, Jesus falls the second time. Under the tremendous weight of the cross, Christ falls to the ground from the heavy burden of poverty. Reaching out for a caring hand, he finds none. He is invisible, just one of thousands of voices crying out for simple human dignity. Our poorest brothers and sisters are ignored and forgotten. With nowhere to turn, they cling to hope and prayer in their daily struggle to survive. Lord, help us to meet the spiritual and material needs of others, and to remember that you bring us hope so that we may bring your light to the world. The eighth station on the way, Jesus comforts the women of Jerusalem. Their laments echoing across the barren plains, the women reach out in desperation for food to feed their hungry children. Their farmlands are parched, their jobs picking coffee have vanished, and hunger is a constant cry of suffering in their houses. All they have in abundance is the grief of watching their little ones starve. Though they themselves suffer, the Christ within moves them to try to comfort their families. Give us your love, Lord, so we may in turn share your love as we feed our brothers and sisters in need. The ninth station on the way, Jesus falls the third time. Starving and neglected, Christ is alone, in need of love. Jesus' frail body is in desperate need of nutritious food. Ignored by others, Christ is branded as worthless. Loving hands offering food and fellowship give strength to Jesus' spirit and help him rise from the ashes of poverty. Thousands more precious and vulnerable children fall beneath the cross of starvation and crushing loneliness. Lord, let us give the hungry this day their daily bread, and forgive those who cast the poor aside with indifference. Give us the courage and strength to serve our poorest brothers and sisters. The 10th station on the way, Jesus is stripped of his garments. Christ is stripped of dignity, freedom, and the chance for a better future. He is alone and vulnerable. There is nowhere for him to go for help. He must live in this impoverished state. Others turn their heads, unable to witness his helplessness. Lord, let us always respect the dignity in each one of your precious children. In all the situations in which we encounter you, help us to turn toward you with compassion and love. The 11th station on the way. Jesus is nailed to the cross. The suffering poor live in the shadows of the cross, ignored or forgotten by the world. Much of the world simply looks on without caring, as Christ endures unspeakable suffering in his poverty. Forgive us, Lord, when we become too preoccupied with our own lives and ignore the silent suffering of the poor. Help us to remain faithful to you and focused on what you have called us to do. The 12th station on the way. Jesus dies on the cross. Christ hangs on the cross of destitution for what seems like an endless amount of time. Without a proper home to live in, food to eat, or clean water to drink, Jesus will be tormented for a lifetime. The poor lead lives of quiet desperation, struggling to survive each day. Jesus, let us always remember those whose lives are overcome by poverty, and help us to comfort and love in the same way that you love us, completely and unconditionally. The 13th station on the way. Jesus is taken down from the cross. When a poor mother is faced with the death of one of her children, she has little left except faith and hope. Hope that someone will help her in her darkest hour, and faith in God's eternal promise to all of us. From the sadness of a mother afraid that her child might die from starvation, the seeds of hope are sown and nurtured by those who have only their trust in God to rely on. Lord, give us compassionate hearts to mourn with the poor while reaching out to help them to transform their lives. Help us to never leave you alone and to hold you close in your hour of greatest need. The 14th station on the way. Jesus is laid in the tomb. Buried beneath oppression, starvation, and homelessness, Jesus silently lies in his tomb, ignored by the rest of the world. This burial place is not even his own, but rather a cave belonging to someone else. Consumed in their own busy lives and uncomfortable at the sight of the homeless, many look away as they hurry past. Lord, how many times have we passed you because we are buried in our own concerns and fail to see you in our poorest sisters and brothers who are suffering? Jesus, grant us the courage to look upon the plight of the least of our brothers and sisters, and share the light of your love with those who are ignored, rejected, and overlooked. May our time this evening stir up in us a spirit of gratitude, compassion, and commitment. We begin grateful for all we have. We grow in compassion for those who suffer. We commit again to following Jesus on the way. Thank you for joining us in this time of prayer. As we experience our own feelings of fear and grief and uncertainty, take a moment to look around now and to see the things that we have, the comforts that are in place. May praying with our brothers and sisters in poverty and in destitution bring us a renewed sense of hope that God is with them and with us. May we continue to look for ways to reach out in love and service to our sisters and brothers in our families, in our cities, and throughout the world. May God continue to be with you and guide you in this time.